All right, good evening, everyone. On this gorgeous Wednesday evening on December 11th. December 11th. Today's budget meeting will spend most of our time on public safety, so police and dispatch, fire, emergency management, and firewards. Before we get started, we have our annual approval of minutes. So does everybody have a copy of the minutes from the last meeting in front of them? Any suggested edits, additions, subtractions?
One minor, page 3 of 4, assessing legal and personal administration. There is merely a typo in the second to last sentence. The library.
Oh, wow. You're trying to take John's job.
I am.
Yeah.
I wanted to impress John tonight.
Two T's in the.
Otherwise, no.
All right.
No other adjustments.
Anything else from anyone on the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Anyone want to make a motion to accept the minutes? Any seconds? All those in favor? Aye. All right, we will move to Bill for the Selectmen's report.
Thank you. Baby sends her regards from Florida. She went over to Celebration last night and saw the snowflakes at 71 degrees, a Celebration town in Disney, and said it was delightful, but she's sure she'd rather be here. I lie. At our meeting last week, the Selectmen heard a report from John Fortney, the new superintendent of SAU 65, gave us an excellent report on the budget process that the school district has gone through and reviewed some of the numbers with us, the most significant being the settlement that they proposed to make with the teachers' union. We also approved the memorandum of understanding with the coalition that's working with the on the question of state education, state funding of education, and we prepared ourselves for the meeting we're going to have on Monday morning with the citizens group. In particular, we plan to focus on the police facilities site issue, but we'll also be talking a little bit about the sewer ordinance that Nick Bear and BB brought to us at our prior meeting. You probably have heard by now that this past Monday, the Police Facilities Committee approved with 7-to-1 vote the recommendation that the site on Seamans Road, that's currently owned by John Garvey, be the site of choice for the police facilities. The next step will be that they will report to us at our meeting next week. We will then enter into negotiations with the Garvey Trust as to whether or not we can buy that land and whatever the plans will be going forward for that. You have in front of you, I believe, a letter from 2 days ago from New London Hospital letting us know that they are reducing the charges for the ambulance for the current fiscal year. That's not reflected in this spreadsheet that you all have showing the current status of the budget against revenue and so on, but that's another $19,000 or so on that will come down. Otherwise, I think we'll get into tonight's activities.
Any questions for Bill?
Bill, why did the hospital reduce the charge?
They
when
changed their
run an
process.
operating
They
loss?
changed the process by which they calculate the fees. And if another night, if we have the time, we'd be happy to share that with you. I just got this letter at 5 o'clock today, so
Yeah.
I haven't even looked at the pages stapled to the back yet.
Yeah, it's interesting financials.
Well,
they
you know,
run-
sometimes good things happen.
Well, that's a good thing, but it seems like they run an operating loss, but I don't understand totally.
Well, it's a longer discussion, Charlie, about how it works. I've been working on it for 20 years. I'd be happy to.
I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay.
Any additional questions for Bill? Ken, do we want to review what is on our tables?
Sure, why don't you give an idea of the... what?
Just so everybody has the same word.
Well, I guess I can. Oh, I can do it if you'd like.
Go for it.
Okay, so you guys were all given this
And what this is, it's our draft tax rate calculator, and we utilize this when we do go for the tax rate with DRA. But what is on it are as you can see, all the columns from 2020 through 2025, and that is our tax rate. That's how our tax rate is calculated. So the first line is the assessed valuation, and that is an estimate. Most of this is an estimate in the pink box. The assessed valuation, we spoke with our assessor today and came with a number that we think is reasonable for what our valuation will be, and that is set in April. Is that?
The values are as of April 1st, so we will send the total valuation of the town, usually in August, to DRA.
And then as you can see, the 15,054,005 is the budget we are currently standing on. That's, what we have right now. Revenue is the estimated revenues, plus keep in mind it's very high because we have the 2 million in there that we would pull down from a bond. So it looks like a big jump, but that's included. The 2 million is also included in the 15 million. Everything else I kept the same as last year so that we're comparing apples to apples. We're, the 30,000 overlay, the 144 for veterans credits, and then the 600,000 from the unassigned fund to buy down the tax rate. But this is we land at 359 on the tax rate, which is a 2% increase, and that's if we stopped everything today and had this budget and those revenues. And I'll change this as we go along. If you guys make some major changes to the budget, I will adjust it and provide another copy.
Not inclusive of the $19,000.
Not included.
Right.
Lynn's pretty good, but she doesn't
Right.
do this hourly.
I thought the software could do everything.
Right. Thanks.
All right. All right. Any questions for Lynn on the sheet? Hey, Karen.
Thank you, Lynn, very much for doing this. It really provides a great benchmark and perspective on kind of where things are as we go forward. So a question I have, the $7,131,000 in revenue, that includes, so the kind of exceptional items would be the $2 million bond issue. Would there be other warrant issues as well?
It's the $2 million. It also includes any capital outlays that we have on the operating side is also listed on the revenue side, so that it includes both those numbers.
So if we go to kind of the summary cover sheet that we got originally that shows changes by departments and look towards the bottom, it will show those capital outlays that we could then use to kind of normalize this in terms of
You should look on your budget worksheet, and on page 19 and 20, you'll see capital outlays, and that's where the 2 million is. That's where another million for other vehicles. Those are the numbers that play into that higher revenue number.
Okay. And another question, too, in the green box, we have yearly percentage increases.
Correct.
So we have from 2022 to 2023 down 36%, but that would be
The reval.
the reval.
Correct.
Is there a way to normalize that so that you don't have such an anomaly, maybe footnote in some way, so that others that could look at this could get that perspective?
Right. I mean, I can footnote that was a year for a reval,
Okay,
but
that's just a
Yeah.
good start. That way there, when people look at it, it just doesn't jump out.
Is there a
Sure.
reason that you'd like that one item footnoted versus other years?
Well, it's an anomaly. It shows it down, tax rate down 36%. So I think it could be confusing for people looking at it saying, oh, our tax rate went down 36%, when in fact the impact on their household wouldn't reflect that, because on a reval, we had the new base being the assessed valuation of their home with the lower rate. So I just think it's a way of being transparent and
Yeah, I
not
guess
drawing
my,
people's attention to, and then having them question what happened.
I don't mind, but then I could say every year should have a footnote because there was some anomaly for each year, right? So each year could have footnotes to say, well, it went up this year because of these things, or it went down 4% because of this.
I guess I
I
call
think you're
it,
just drawing, I feel like you're drawing out the one major decrease and
No.
not the other increases or
I
minor
think what I'm
decreases.
saying is this is what I would call in my world an extraordinary item. And extraordinary items would be something that would be typically footnoted. And we have a change in assessed valuations every year that comes with the natural growth of the town. This is a special event in my mind that it's a revaluation of the entire town. So I'd be interested to hear what other committee members might think about this. I mean, am I the exception, or do other people agree that it may be worthwhile just to note that particular thing?
Happy to hear from others.
Yeah, it presumes, without having some notation to it, that generally citizens assume that their tax rate actually went down, which it did, but the rate they end up paying does not necessarily go down. And that may be a sufficient footnote so that it doesn't appear to the uninformed eye that the tax rate itself is, their amount out of pocket is down by that amount.
But if you look at the top part of this spreadsheet, you're looking at each of those tax rates. You also can look at each of the valuations, and you can see that in '23, the valuation was up by 58%. So that ties into why. So if you look down here, negative 36, there's a 58% increase, and there's our tax rate dropping. So that,
An alternative, and, I'm not trying to be picky here, I'm just saying, people may not be able to make that connection of themselves, connecting the dots. They may just look at this as a snapshot. But an alternative to a narrative is to maybe asterisk and tie over to that year, and then that would draw people's attention to the actual assessed valuation. So those are just my thoughts. Anyone else?
Just information, how often is a town-wide reassessment done?
About every 5 years. And I guess, it's not a big deal, we can add it. I think the people in town, on page F24, our town report has all this information, it's never footnoted, I think.
Right.
But I don't think it's a huge deal to add here. If it makes it easier for people to read, it's not a big deal. A little asterisk, reval year, we can do that. But I would point to the town report, which has just the data. It just has that information. We don't do any percentages.
Right.
I think putting a percentage here, where we don't do it here.
Yeah, I guess that's my,
Lynn was just trying to help people to see. It's just something we've added on. We can certainly a footnote. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. It's just a clerical thing. We
No.
can add a footnote.
And I appreciate Lynn doing this very much so. I think this is really helpful, and to take it to that extra step is much appreciated. So thank you.
all right. Any other? Yeah, go ahead, Lou.
I want 2 points. Number one, I wanted to praise our finance officer. The software training was superb. The software, I would encourage all the members of the budget committee to become versant in it because it is absolutely superb. Having said that, I wanted to also thank one of the former members of the Budget Committee, Colin Beasley, because he was adamant about the acquisition of the software. And I think it's really, if anything, it's going to make our jobs a lot easier to understand.
All right.
Well done.
Excuse me, Chris, could I just add to that? I was at the same session Lou was at, and I would like to say my thank you to Lynn as well. That was a very thorough and exciting presentation, and look forward to becoming more well-versed in it. So it's going to be a great tool. Thank you for the time you took.
you're welcome.
Thanks, Lynn. All right, if there are no other questions, we can move on to police review. So Chief, in your budget worksheets, it's page 9 and 10.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I would also like to start by thanking Lynn. No, I'm just kidding. It's contagious. All right. So you all have, are you looking at our worksheet, page 9 and 10, or are some of you also looking at the sub-department summary? That's not mine, though. That's not me.
What would you like us to look at?
Either one, I suppose, but I'll reference both of them, I guess, throughout, but you can look at the one up on the screen. So I took a real hard look at both police and dispatch this year and looked at our actual spending versus what I had been budgeting for the past few years. So I really made an effort this year to be more in line with actual spending while trying to take into account what increases might happen in the next fiscal year for us. So I kind of break my budgets up into a couple of different parts. The first is wages and anything related to employee costs. And then the second part is what I kind of consider to be our operational costs. So for police, it's basically everything from I'll start with the operational costs, 341 telephone and pagers down to K9. And then I can talk about employee-related items. So as you'll see, if you're looking at the sub-department summary, you can certainly tell on the other page as well, but this one is really nice that it outlines what line items have unchanged, increased, or decreased. There are only 5 line items in my operational portion, again, what I consider operations every day of the police department budget that have increased, and those are computer license and fees, vehicle repair and maintenance, equipment lease and maintenance, dues and subscriptions, and then K9. So the computer license and fees, the reason for that increase is that we moved one ongoing expense out of computer support and into computer license and fees. It was just a more appropriate place for that to be. Also, we added electronic ticketing and warning system to the cruiser mobile data terminals, the computers that we have in the cruisers. It's a much easier way for officers to be able to track things when they do motor vehicle stops. And so it's all part of the new software that we are using. So there is, of course, an ongoing fee to having that type of software in the cruiser. So that would be the reason for the increase in computer license and fees. And my thought was tonight I would just go through briefly the increases, and then I can touch upon any of the decreases or unchanged items, certainly asking questions as you have them. The next increase that I'd like to talk about is vehicle repair and maintenance. This I did increase by $3,000, and the reason for that is that we'll have 2 of our frontline patrol vehicles are 2021s, and so they'll be a little bit older in the next year. They each have about 50,000 miles on them now, and so they might be looking at some other increased maintenance costs come FY26. Equipment lease and maintenance didn't go up a whole lot, but it did go up $60, and the reason for that increase is that's the lease of our copier machine. Dues and subscriptions did go up as well. That went up by $1,000. The reason for that increase was that the cost to be a member community of the Central New Hampshire Special Operations Unit is going up by $500 for every community that wants to be a member community. Additionally, at this point right now, we don't have any department members who are a member of that team. We used to have 2 people who were a member of that team, and you see some savings if you contribute a department member to be on the Special Operations Unit. But we had one person leave the department, so that took one off, and then another person who was a member of that team decided to take a step back from that role. So we don't have anyone on the team currently. But we are still a member community. So if we need Special Operations Unit in town for any sort of major event, we make a phone call and the entire team would come with a lot of extra equipment that we certainly just don't have. But that's not to say we wouldn't commit a department member to the Central New Hampshire SOU again. It's just we don't have anyone on it right now, so I feel appropriate to budget for that going forward. And then the final increase in the operations portion is in K-9. It's an increase of $250. There is a K-9 donation fund, which we do pull funds from whenever there is money available in there. But given that's a donation fund, I can't rely entirely on that because I don't know if there will be money donated to that. So those are essentially the increases in the operations portion of the budget. There are some other decreases. One decrease to draw your attention to is the new police cruiser. It's a decrease because we have some money having participated in details over the years. We have the detail revolving fund. And so my plan would be when purchasing a cruiser next year to put some of the money, I'm only asking for $60,000, which is essentially the cost of the cruiser itself. The cost of the upfit for the cruiser would come out of detail revolving fund. So instead of asking for approximately $80,000, I thought I would ask for $60,000 while utilizing some of the funds we have available in detail revolving fund for that very purpose. Other items that are decrease, like radio repair and replacement. It's hard to tell when our radios will need to be repaired or replaced. So, but again, traditionally, our actual costs just haven't been as much as what we have budgeted for in the past. Another line item to draw your attention to is the accreditation line item. At the Board of Selectmen work session that we had a little while ago, I had offered to remove that $2,000 from accreditation. And that's not to say that we wouldn't still try to participate in the New Hampshire accreditation program, but currently it's a grant-funded program, so agencies can participate for free. I don't know if the grant funding will continue by the time we get to our FY26 budget, but New Hampshire in particular has made a real effort to encourage agencies to become accredited. And so I think in order to do that, they like to try and provide grant funding because that's going to be a big barrier for some communities is the fees to be a part of that program. So that's why that one says it's not used this year. Other line items, again, it might seem small, but some of them were decreased by $250, $50 in copier supplies. Gasoline decreased a little bit, and miscellaneous decreased a little bit. So that's essentially the changes in the operational costs, so-called, of the budget. Moving on to employee portions. Thank you, Lynn. I had decreased as well at that Board of Selectmen work session our part-time wages. You'll see in FY25 I had budgeted for $15,000. Originally for FY26 I had looked to budget $10,000, I think, but I went down to $7,300 in an effort to reduce some more. And then there's a shift differential that is an increase in both police and dispatch, which I think I'd like to talk about at the end after I talk about dispatch, because it applies the same to both. So we can talk about that then, now, whatever your preference is, but that's essentially the police budget. There's no major projects that we have going on this year. Within the past couple of years, we had done a major firearm replacement program project that we had looked to do, but no new personnel am I requesting, and no other major projects for the police department per se on the horizon right now, operationally speaking.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any questions? John?
On the cruisers that you're replacing, what is the nature of the car that's being replaced?
I have to give some kudos here to Colin, who had emailed and requested of all the departments, I think, for an outline of the whole fleet, and I had not yet put it in a format like this, so Thank you. I didn't even know what the warranty was on some of these cruisers, so that was helpful. So in answer to your question, John, the car that is being replaced is the 2020 Chevy Tahoe, and so yes, it's the 2020 Chevy Tahoe. That car has 70-ish thousand miles on it right now. A little bit of a warranty left on it. And so every year, we don't have like a set in 2029, et cetera. I mean, I know I'm going to replace this cruiser. Every year, the health of the vehicles are evaluated depending on what their needs have been, what their mechanical issues have been, if any, and what we might be looking forward to in the future. And so knowing that we're going to have the other two patrol cars, the 2021 Dodge Chargers, coming down the pike for replacement, the reason that the Chevy Tahoe is looking to be replaced is it'll be 6 years old by FY26. It'll have quite a bit more miles on it.
Is there a reason we buy Tahoes instead of Fords?
Sure. Yep. We did actually some research on this, and we asked around to some of the surrounding agencies that we know that have used Fords or Durangos, or we certainly have had Tahoes, and we haven't received great feedback on the Fords, and the Durangos have also had some issues there. The mechanic that we use prefers certainly to work on Ford or those type of products on Chevy products. We like them. They're a lot roomier. There are a lot more space in them. Our upfitter also recommends them because they're good to work on. They're good to put all of our equipment in. And so we definitely have some reasons that we prefer the Tahoes over Fords. Again, we've heard some negative feedback in the area about the Fords.
I guess my only comment is that as I read about the longevity of police vehicles now, they're talking about 120,000 to, in some cases, 160,000 miles. And that the Tahoe at 4 years of age, and it would be, say, 6 years of age when you replace it, with 70,000 miles on it seems...
Well, it'll have more miles on it when it is
Well, I
due to
suspect
be
in
replaced.
the next 2 years that might go somewhere, but I think that I guess I think we're not being as conservative as I'd like to see it. So
Sure.
thank you.
You might have seen also recently that New Hampshire State Police is also going to Tahoes. It's kind of where the trend is going in law enforcement in New Hampshire. Certainly, some communities go with different vehicles, but we're choosing to do that. The V8 engine is also a help. They do need to be the police package, and it's cruisers aren't inexpensive items, but it's literally where the rubber meets the road, and those officers are in those cruisers a lot. And I think it's important for us to provide them with a safe and reliable vehicle to be in.
Just in passing, what I understand though is that the Ford Interceptor, or what it is there, was it Explorer Interceptor, it's got a lot of names to it, is the most popular police car in the country. So
It might be in the country, but
Yeah.
as for
Not
for
up here,
here,
huh?
I don't know about here. We received very negative feedback on the Fords.
with the state going more and more to Tahoes, does that give you more buying power or not? Do you buy through the state or?
We already do use the dealership with the state bid, so we do use that. I did inquire about leasing some vehicles as well, so that's an option that we might look to in the future. I know that Bill Helm had raised the point of there potentially being a spike year if we needed to replace two cruisers in the same year, and so I understand that. So that's why I looked into a leasing program which would allow us to lease more police cars over a period of time, so 2 or 3 cruisers, whatever the decision might be, depending if we get a cruiser in this budget, if it's approved, over a 3-year period of time. So there's an option for leasing in the future as well to hopefully avoid that kind of a spike.
I guess I see, and I must admit, I've talked to Bill about this, but because of the spikes and so forth, years ago, the police cars were all paid out of capital reserves. But,
Yeah.
But we only had like 3 vehicles, so you were putting one in, taking one out, so we went to paying for them yearly. Now with these spikes and so forth, the capital reserve is another way of smoothing this curve down, and I don't know.
I think, I think the reason it went into the operating budget is that it wasn't an every other year item that was purchased, or every 2 or 3 years. It began being an every year item, which is why it.
Exactly.
Okay, so.
Yep, that was exactly. And we were keeping cars 3 years, 100,000 miles, period, just whether they were.
They start to change at the 3-year, 100,000-mile mark. And again, I encourage folks not to assimilate a cruiser to what you drive personally. You might have a car with 125,000 miles on it that runs great and gets you around town and does just fine. But we use these cars in a very different manner.
Thank you.
Karen?
So, just so I understand, Chief, on the line item in the budget is 60,000, but that'll be matched with another 12 or 14 coming out of,
More than that, probably about 20.
but that would be fully outfitted, or what is for just a straight-up purchase of the vehicle?
60,000.
Okay. And I guess I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that John made.
I'm sorry, Karen, I was incorrect. 55,000 was the quote. I don't know if that'll be the same in FY26 for the cruiser itself, to purchase just the car.
Okay. So kind of to follow up on a couple of points John made, I happen to probably see the same news report on the state police purchase or the state police contract as they're shifting from the Dodges over to the Chevys. So I reached out to them and got some information, that I thought may be helpful. And just as a point of comparison on cost, so I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe there's an opportunity to understand more about their contract, because it looks like going in their agreement, they have Chevy Tahoes, the PPV, and the SSVs, and I got this from the state police in terms of their contract. So their cost on these is like a little over $51,000. So just thinking out loud here, is that something that we could try and take advantage of in terms of whether it is giving us a benchmark for really what we could expect if we really had that in our back pocket in terms of negotiating or working with some
Their cost for
other-
the Tahoe is 51
$51,697. I'll be happy to share.
going forward, or already that they paid? Because the cruiser that we just paid for was 52-ish. I don't have
This
that
is,
one in front of me.
this is
Think.
the contract dated November 7th.
It might be because they're buying dozens and dozens
Yeah, I mean,
of Tahoes,
It
but
pertains to their agreement
sure.
with regard to their new purchase,
Mm-hmm.
with regard to the decision to move away from the Dodges over to the Chevys. But it just gives maybe a frame of reference.
Mm.
When we agree to purchase a vehicle, is there a possibility of going in with a consortium or some other communities to try and take advantage of the volumes? Or are we buying them kind of as a standalone?
We buy
single
them as a
vehicle?
standalone. If there is an opportunity to go in as more of a consortium, I'm not aware of it. That's never been something that I've known to happen. I guess it's possible. I'll always ask the question, I suppose, but we buy it alone because it's the town of New London engaging into a contract
No,
with the.
I get that, but I'm just thinking if other towns have a need for a vehicle or.
I don't know
Are you
if. yeah.
suggesting that chief contact other police chiefs to see if they need to buy a similar vehicle and see if there could be a deal at a dealership?
Yeah, well,
I don't know how I would.
I guess what I'm
that.
suggesting is that there are opportunities sometimes to take advantage of some volumes. And we have information relative to what the state police has done, and I know I'm not suggesting we can get into their contract, but just as a bargaining, a point of a start of negotiation, that we know that there's a certain Chevy Tahoe PPV or an SSV that's being able to be purchased at a significant discount to what it is that we have at this juncture, and it may be an opportunity to negotiate.
Basically ask them if they can do any better on the price.
Chief
Haggle
Lyon-
a little more.
Chief, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Like our police chief, we actually go through, whether it be Dodge, Ford, Chevy, GMC, whatever the case may be, and there is a state bid. And so there's a contract that's awarded, generally speaking, to a dealership for all state vehicles to go through. And in doing so, they take in consideration all the vehicles that are purchased in the state of New Hampshire. My guess is, and things are a little bit funky with the state of New Hampshire and their contractual obligations specifically to Chevy for that Tahoe, but when we buy a vehicle, I'd love to go into a dealership and buy a Chevy Tahoe for $54,000 or $56,000 or the Chevy Tahoes that are available to the general citizens aren't the Chevy Tahoes that are available to municipalities. So I think that certainly the $4,000 or whatever the case may be, reduction that the state's getting is because the sheer volume that they're purchasing. But we do, when the department heads look at vehicles, we will reach out to other communities. The Kearsarge Mutual Aid that we're part of, we talk about hose or whatever the case is. So certainly I think that when we're looking at vehicles, the town of New London's getting the best price possible for that specific vehicle based upon the state bid. Does that make sense? Doesn't look it.
No, I thought that's what I was being advised, is that we don't get to take advantage of.
No, we do. That's why we use that dealership, is that they have the state bid. So
And what dealership
all,
is this? I'm just-
McMulkin, Chevrolet in Nashua.
And sometimes if there's, for instance, when we purchased our last vehicle, we have a relationship with banks, and banks reached out to Chevy and said, would you be willing, because we have, fortunately, the service managers in Wilmot, New Hampshire, so we can drop off our vehicle. They drive it down because of the shortage and issues with personnel. So sometimes dealerships will reach out to Chevy or GMC or whomever the vehicle manufacturer is, and they can certainly match. But there's never been a case that we've gone out and we've said, okay, McMullen has the state bid. Can you do better than what the state bid is?
I don't think
Typically,
that's what
they
I was
can't.
asking. I think what I was asking, since the state bid was 51,000 and change, if that.
For state police.
And we're not
Understood,
able.
Understood.
Yeah.
I was just raising a question
Sure.
that we have in the budget 60,000 and probably taking another, I forget, 12 or 14 from the revolving fund, that it just struck me that this list cost was quite a bit lower. And would there be an opportunity to leverage this list cost to our benefit?
Oh,
That was the-
absolutely. Yeah.
That was where my.
No, it'd be
question
fantastic.
was
We'd
coming
love to get it.
I think if that was happening, though, then state police would be buying everyone's Chevy Tahoe in the entire state of New Hampshire.
I guess, can I ask, is it safe to assume that when we go to the dealership, we're getting their best possible price?
Yes, because it's the state bid. The dealership has put forward to the state of New Hampshire through the bid process that this is what we can do.
Yeah, right. So it's
And
not.
that's why they get the state bid.
So I think the dealership is saying this is the price that this vehicle costs, right? So it's the best possible price that we can get. It's not as if they're looking to charge us more than other communities, et cetera, right?
No, I'm,
Again, I bet it's part of the contract that state police came up with to get the dozens of Tahoes that they needed.
so just, you can maybe understand my confusion, then when I look at the line item in the budget, it's 60,000, and then understanding there's another, whatever, 12 or 14 coming on top of that. So what is the actual price for the base
The
car that
cruiser
you're
itself,
buying?
$55,000. Well, to be exact,
Okay,
$54,987.
okay.
So
And,
you're curious what the additional $5,000 is for?
and we're also having money coming out of the revolving fund, so that's
To
what just,
fit.
Yeah,
to
it's
fit the
about a
vehicle.
$20,000 to $25,000 upfit charge, and we'll reuse whatever equipment we can reuse from the old cruiser: radar, dash camera, cage if it fits in the back. But sometimes those
So I
items
guess the
don't
question, it
transfer
sounds like,
over.
is why is it 60 and not 55 in the budget?
Because I just wanted to use a number that I thought would be reasonable to take out of the detail revolving fund as well. I didn't want to totally deplete the detail revolving fund, because currently I purchase like tires out of that instead of putting that in the operating budget. The detail revolving fund is something that whenever we work at detail, all of that money goes into that account and we get paid out of that account as well. So there's a surplus in that account, which is why it's helpful when we work details. And over the years, it's grown to, I think it's 27,000-ish.
so
Yeah.
are we saying it's okay to have this, we're thinking that keep it at the 60 rather than bring it down to the 55?
I think that's something we would do when we vote.
Okay, so
Right.
it's gonna.
Oh, so you're saying, Karen, instead of a straight 60, you would feel more comfortable with it being the price of the cruiser itself?
Right. I mean, we're working on it, trying to work on a very tight budget. I mean, I know the select board have asked departments to come up with 10,000 in cuts, 14,000 in cuts, and 5,000, given that context of what they're being asked to do, that's a good amount. So if it's actually going to be closer to 55,000,
Well,
I would.
it sounds like that
It's-
money's going to come from somewhere else, right? So the additional pieces that she was adding, that money's still going to come from somewhere else. So she's just
I was-
putting it as part of that line item.
Trying not to use as much of that detail revolving fund instead of operating, but
That's,
So if other people have questions about the cruiser, and then we can,
I'm sorry, I have another one. I'm sorry.
go ahead. Don't be sorry.
And this is kind of following up on what John asked as well. While doing my homework, I also engaged the state police and to ask them what kind of mileage do they get out of their vehicles. And they told, the response was typically it's 150,000 a cruiser, and there are times it goes up to 200,000. So I'm just kind of circling back to John's comments about maybe thinking about the mileage and pushing that a little.
yeah,
Little.
again, they have hundreds of cruisers, so I think if they were to replace them more often, it would just be really, really costly.
I would also imagine that a state policeman is driving on the interstate from
Yep.
Concord to New London,
Yeah,
Yep,
they put
totally
a
get
lot
that.
getting
more.
more
Right.
miles, which would be an increase in mileage over the course of the life of the car.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But in terms of order of magnitude with our,
Did you get years from them? Like what's their average year? Like how many years does a cruiser? Did they touch on that at all?
no,
Just curious what their ratio is from years to mileage, and ours is years to mileage. I mean, generally, we try to replace our cruisers, at least the patrol ones, about every 6 years.
so they have mileage on them. I mean, I'm sorry I have a lot of questions. This is-
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand all these moving parts.
Yeah,
thoroughly
after
as
about
possible.
the 6-year mark, I mean, the warranties start expiring if they haven't already, and generally about after 6 years, there's a lot of mileage on them. So
And what is the
they-
mileage? I thought I heard 72,000 or something? when we
no,
replaced?
currently it's 6. Where's my mileage? Here it is, 69,115 when I did this last month. So I imagine it's more now. And that car averages about almost 14,000 miles a year. So in the next year and a half, it could put on another 15 to 20,000 miles on it. But again, the car is going to be 6 years old. Also realizing that we're going to have 2 other cars right behind this that are going to need to be replaced. So I either try to lump in this Tahoe with the other 2 cars that need to be replaced in the same year, which is a bigger year, more expensive, or we put this car off for 4 more years, which I think would be problematic.
It's kind of hard to follow all this in a narrative. I think,
Well, perhaps
Yeah.
if you have additional questions, you can talk to Chief on the side. I'm also just wanting to make sure that we can get through the other departments tonight.
no, I understood, I
And
understand.
I'm happy for you to ask questions. I mean, but again, if it sounds like this is one that you definitely have a lot of questions about,
Well, I guess just understanding how cars have changed through the years, and I know there's a difference between what people drive for their personal use and what's used as a police or an emergency vehicle. I understand also that we're really looking to be as prudent on the budget as possible, as I'm not saying we haven't been in other years, but it just seems it may be a good time to start to reevaluate, or at least ask if we need to rethink some of these longer-standing policies, practices. And I think it would be really helpful to have something in front of us to, the Chief mentioned you have a report, or you've done a report on the fleet, just so we actually can see these in black and white. Is just coming out the gate is difficult to follow as a narrative. So
Yeah,
just-
there's a lot
I
of
will leave
cars
it
in
at that.
play.
Thank you, Chief, for your time.
Lou?
Yes. Chief, I have, let's see, you've taken down the part-time wages from 15 down to 7,300. What's the impact on that? What's not going to get done?
Potentially, part-timers wouldn't be used for, essentially, I mean, they're used for some special events right now. They help supplement things when we need them, like special events in town. So there is a potential that we wouldn't use them as often. But again, looking at our actual costs over the past few years, and the part-time line item kind of ebbs and flows. We only have 3 part-timers right now, so depending on their availability, how much they can work, if they're in a place where they can contribute, we use them more or less. But again, if you look over the past few years at our actuals, we've never exceeded this 7,300 that I've taken it down to. So even in our bigger years, like FY22, that was the most expensive at 6,100 and change. So it seems like that would be a reasonable number, and we can try that. Again, I made that offer to the Board of Selectmen at their work session in an effort to try and cut, like Karen was saying, anywhere that we could.
Next one is accreditation. You're banking on the fact that the state, now what happens if the state says no?
If the state says no, then we might not be able to participate in the accreditation program that year if I don't have money elsewhere in the budget. But it is my hope and intention that New London can participate in the New Hampshire State Accreditation Program going forward, because I believe in accreditation. I think it's an important thing for any
it's
agency
absolutely necessary.
to have. But again, it's not a it's not a guarantee that the grant funding will continue to be available. But if New Hampshire wants to continue to push law enforcement or encourage law enforcement agencies to be accredited, I think they try to do that, incentivizing them by using a grant program or being eligible for grant funding.
Okay, next one is recruitment. You've lost an officer. And, we've spoken, you and I, about it, is the recruitment bonuses that are being paid across the state to get a good person. They are, I'm not going to say astronomical, but they're certainly.
$30,000 is an
Yes.
incredible amount of money. That's one of them that I've seen.
And
For
to
a
get
certified
somebody who
officer.
is already accredited,
Certified, yes.
certified.
Yep.
So do we have any room in the budget for a recruitment bonus for an officer or candidate whom you really would like to have?
We have given out sign-on bonuses in the past, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, but that hasn't come out of, did that come out of mine, or was that was mine? That was a couple, 3 years ago, so I don't recall, but that one would have come out of full-time wages, because theoretically, if we're down an officer for any length of time, a few weeks, we'll have that type of money. And in the past, it's been $5,000 paid out in installments over a 1-year period of time. 1/3 at sign-on, 1/3 at 6 months, and 1/3 at the 1-year mark. If they stay for a full year, they get the remainder of that. Now, $5,000, comparatively speaking, for a sign-on bonus in New Hampshire law enforcement right now is very small, very, very small. So sign-on bonuses are interesting. It can be a way to recruit already certified officers, but there's another caveat to that, retention is a huge issue as well. So retention bonuses might be something that the town might like to look at, not only for law enforcement, for our highway department, our firefighters as well, just town employees in general, but certainly for public safety, that's a big issue.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, you gave the explanation for the computer license and fees. Is that something you expect to move toward, like the consistency around that 27.9? I know you can't foresee far into the future, but just, I know the electronic ticketing, I'm sure there are other reasons that it went up. Is that something, is that just a one-time thing, or do you think from year to year that's gonna be around that cost?
It does go up a little bit because it pays for some other items like our digital fingerprint machine. Our scheduling software went up, but only by a little bit. Our data backup and the e-ticketing for the cruisers. So it might go up some percentages of each of those
Yeah,
things.
I'm just saying it's not gonna come back down to the previous amounts in years past.
No, I don't anticipate that it comes back
Okay.
down, unfortunately.
That's what I was curious about. Okay.
Yeah, I have one more question. You pay for, when you get a new officer, hopefully to replace the one that you lost, you have to pay for the police academy, is that correct?
No, New Hampshire, you don't pay for the police academy. That is paid for through the general fund in the state of New Hampshire.
Good.
We pay their salary while they're gone. We pay them to attend the police academy, but we don't pay the police academy a fee to send someone there.
Do you have any idea of how much does it cost to recruit an individual and bring him up to speed as a fully functioning?
Oh, yeah, well, certainly time-wise, the police academy itself is 16 weeks long, and then we have about a 12-week field training program. So it'll be 6 months before a police officer is ready to actually hit the road, and tens of thousands of dollars between their salary and the time it takes to train them and what we have to do to pay the training officers.
So we're talking tens
So-
of thousands of dollars, basically.
Yes, it's expensive. Outfitting them, not upfitting them, that's the cruisers. Outfitting the police officers. Yes, so.
Okay, but this is not reflected in the budget.
It is in the new officer, new employee expense. That one is $5,250. We didn't spend that last year, I believe, because we didn't need to. We didn't hire any new employees, new police employees. But that's about what it'll cost to totally outfit the new officer.
That's to outfit, not to.
Yep. Correct, just to outfit them,
So
get them
basically,
what they
the
need.
5,250 is it's a very low figure compared to what it's going to cost.
Oh, that's just to put the clothes on their back.
Yeah.
And,
And then you have
Yeah.
accreditation, certification, the whole.
yep, time, yeah.
Okay.
Charlie, you have a question?
Chief, I've got a bunch of penny questions. I'm going to save those, and I'll do it separately offline with you, small budget item
Okay.
questions because of time. But my large question is on overtime. So I just looked at overtime. We're increasing it 19.2% by $10,611 this year, budget to budget. And when I look at our overtime budget for 2025 also, it represents for 2020, I want to be right, 55,000 is this year, right? The budget for
Yes.
this year?
Yes.
That represents 8.6% of wages.
The over-
Let me just
Sorry.
give you the
Sorry,
total
yep.
picture I look at and drives my question. The actual for 2024 was $48,008. That's 7.6% of wages. And the budget for 2026 is $65,611. That's 9.5% of wages. So we're going up in total by 19.2%. And the percentage of overtime in relationship to wages is also going up over prior actual and budget years. What's the reason for the increase in overtime?
I
To
think
that
it needs-
amount?
Sure. I think it needs a little bit of history and context. So for many years, the overtime wages was just a standard block of money, and it wasn't based on like how much actual overtime people have worked. So some years we never even got close to that 50,000. It was just kind of a block of money set aside. So as time went on, that 50,000 was stated that way for many years, and we finally crept up to the point where we were at that $50,000, which would have been FY23.
Right.
And then FY24, we were about the same. So FY25 currently, that was an incorporation of our COLAs and our step increases. And so the reason for going up to the 65, again, is to incorporate a COLA and a step increase. And also I anticipate a promotion in or about January of 2026 to help with some succession planning. A promotion of to a corporal, which is more money. So I took the
And that affects,
theoretical.
that affects overtime?
Yes,
versus-
because if they're making more money starting in January,
Yeah.
their overtime rate will increase. So I tried to
understand.
take that into account of about 6 months of wages for a promotion, again, for succession planning in 2 years from now.
So generally speaking, it's presumed that we're going to have a set, regular overtime is sort of part of the staffing requirement.
Yes, yep, to cover leave time, sick time, training time.
Someone leaves.
Someone leaves, there's more overtime.
All right,
We might be facing more overtime right now because we're down a police officer.
okay.
But still people, even though we're down a police officer position, folks still need time off. They have sick days and they still need to go to training, even if we're down a position.
Yeah, one more question and then we can move on. Just speak a little bit about gasoline.
Oh, gas, I wish I had a crystal ball for gasoline.
Well, so the same question will go to the chief when he gets his chance. But the budget's going up. I've got a calculation of 13.3% increase. But my sense, we've got a contract of some kind that gets us a better
Yeah, we use the
rate.
WEX program, so we do get, we don't pay taxes on the
Right.
gas, so we use the WEX program to fuel up our cars. I went down in gasoline this year from 30,000 in
Saw that.
FY25 to 28. Again, trying to look at what our actuals were for the past few years, recognizing that I'm not sure what will happen with the price of gasoline and what it's going to be in FY26.
Yeah, I was just looking at it from last year. COVID years, prices of gas were up significantly.
Right.
And my crystal ball would say they're probably going to go down. They are down. They're going to continue to stay low. But I just,
It's a-
I didn't know if your mileage increase was greater or in the calculation, do you look at it on a gas price per gallon converted to the estimated mileage of all the vehicles? Or is it
I did that in FY24, I believe, which is why I got to the 37,000, because I was using what our price for gas was.
yeah,
When I was planning for FY24, it would have been fall of 22, right? Yeah, and our gas was far more pricey. So in FY24, we didn't use nearly the amount that we had budgeted for.
yeah.
But looking at our actuals for the past few years, that's all right in the $24,000-ish mark. So, I mean, I could go down a little bit more in it, but we risk going over in that line item because I don't know what gas
yeah.
is going to do.
Okay. One simple last question. I'll take the opportunity while I have the microphone. The K-9 fund, is there a balance in that fund?
Oh, I don't know what it is
So
right now, I'm sorry.
it could be a very small point, but I don't, know. There's money in that fund that's donated, or?
Yes,
how
yep,
is
folks
that?
can donate. It's usually in every edition of Municipal Matters. If you're not a member, you should subscribe now.
Thanks.
Kim will
I'm
tell
sure
you.
all of our budget members
enough
get municipal
reading.
matters delivered to their inbox of their email.
So folks will make a donation to the Canine Donation Fund if they would like to, and those funds are used solely for the canine. So in the past, we've purchased equipment out of it, and we've paid for anything we can. We typically use out of the Canine Donation Fund before operating, but again, looking at what our actual costs have been, I don't have those numbers right in front of me. We could get them of what our costs have been above and beyond what we have spent out of the operating budget.
Yeah, that's, not knowing
Looking at
that
that,
other
yeah,
answer,
sure.
that was where my question was coming from.
Sure.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
All right, anything else for Chief before we transition to dispatch? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Just very quickly, backtracking to the car. Will you be looking at, maybe sooner rather than later, into the leasing versus putting in capital reserves or something so that perhaps we have knowledge and if we need to move on that this year?
Oh, like if we needed to put in capital reserve funds this
Well,
year for
Well,
going
to
forward?
smooth out, so when you have this anomaly with the two cars and so forth, it just seems to me that it's something that we ought to be pursuing and working on, because I think we're going to have these spikes again, because all cars aren't going to wear out at the same time, and so I would like to see us smoothing out the budget with the capital reserves or something
Yeah,
like that.
we'll look at that. It has been smooth for several years now because it's been replaced at one cruiser a year
Right.
until FY '22 or 21, maybe, when we didn't get a cruiser. FY '23. Because in FY '22, when cruisers were extremely hard to come by. Cars were in general, but certainly cruisers, and the dealership had ordered two
Right.
accidentally, so we seized that opportunity, which I'm thankful for. We didn't have one in FY '23, and then we're going back into that replacement cycle. So this is something we've never faced before. We've never purchased two cruisers at one time or had two in the fleet that are looking at replacement the same year. So it's a little bit uncharted territory. So that's why I was trying to get creative with looking at leasing options and things. But the capital reserve is another way to look at too.
Yeah, I think the chairman of the board here and I've talked about that a little bit, and so I'd just like to see us be able to smooth that out, and so we don't get into that again.
Sure.
But thank you.
I'd like to follow up as well. Chief, would it be possible to share with the committee that list of cruises?
Oh, yes.
That you have?
Yes,
And also, it's probably already included, but just in case it's not, for the inventory call, the mileage and when you would expect to see.
Yep, that's all
To
in there.
replace it, so that, I think having something to look at would be very helpful.
Sure.
To understand what it is you're doing with the fleet. And, like I say, I'm still not clear on this.
Yeah.
How much actually you want to spend on a cruiser with regard to that 60,000.
I'm looking to put $60,000 toward the new cruiser, all
That
told.
includes the outfitting, is what.
No, that's going to
Why
be the.
can I not
Here,
follow this?
So the cruiser's 55, the cruiser is 55,000.
Yeah.
Right? She took money out of a different line item and put an additional 5,000 for tires.
Yeah, I'm looking to spend $60,000 out of the operating budget toward the new cruiser. It's
So-
going to cost us about $80,000 for the cruiser all told.
But
But I'm
Chris-
looking to take $20,000 out of our detail revolving fund to put toward that $80,000 to help offset the cost out of our operating budget.
And Chris is saying, and then part of that would be buying tires, but the,
No, I was
No,
just
no, no.
saying- just
'Cause it
saying,
has tires
That
when
was
you
an
buy it,
example she
right?
had. There is a revolving fund that they have that they can use, similar to what rec has and other departments, some have. a
totally
revolving
get
fund.
that. What I'm trying to understand is what is the price of this cruiser as a vehicle? And then on top of that, what it costs to outfit the vehicle.
55,000 for the vehicle and about 20 to 25 for the outfitting.
Okay, so this 60,000 on the line item includes the vehicle plus the outfit.
$5,000
which you're going
toward
to
the outfitting.
Offset coming out of the revolving fund.
Yes,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, are we ready to move to dispatch?
Sure.
All right, let's do that. So that will be pages 11 and 12 in your worksheet, so you can skip a page. Starts on the bottom of page 11. And I guess similar, do you just want to cover changes?
Yes.
Yep.
So in the dispatch, I'll do similar to what I did for police, which is talk really about kind of the operational side of this budget or piece of this budget, which is essentially everything from the 342, computer license and fees, all the way down to the end, where's miscellaneous. And all of these items, none of those items have actually increased. Everything has either decreased or is unchanged from FY25. The reason for some of the decreases in computer license and fees is that we had to subscribe to 2 different operating systems for FY25 while we made the transition to our new one. And then computer support just went down, but that's part of the overall contract that the town has with VC3. So some of the reasons for that is that we moved the recurring fee from computer support to license and fees, the same thing we did on police. Some of the other line items are unchanged, and I did decrease conferences and training, new equipment, and uniforms and safety equipment, again, all in an effort to be more in line with what our actual costs have been over the past few years. And all told, out of the dispatch budget, as far as those operational costs are actually down by about $8,000. And in the police, I'd forgotten to mention this, it's down by about $9,000 just for those operational pieces. Remember, I kind of broke it down from employee-related items to the operational expenses.
Yeah.
So that's the dispatch budget in a nutshell. If anyone has any questions on those, but remembering that I'd like to talk about the shift differential request in both of the budgets still.
Do you want to make any comments about that before we ask questions?
Sure. Actually, I should touch upon the increase in part-time wages in dispatch first. Last year, I had budgeted for actually 12 hours a week of coverage from our part-time communication specialists, but I've found that we need to budget a little bit more for that to cover, again, vacancies in dispatch, leave time, sick time, training, and so I'm looking to cover 16 hours a week of extra coverage on average, and that would be the reason for the increase there. The overtime wages increased again, but again, that is due in part to the COLA and the step increase, but also when we did the wage study recently, we did break out communication specialist 1 and 2 positions, basically for people that have either more experience or a higher level of training as a communications specialist. And so I would be looking to put those people into a higher level of that position from communication specialist 1 or 2. So that would be the reason for the increase in the overtime wages. And so now onto the shift differential conversation that applies to both police and dispatch. I did write a memo, and it's in Questica as an attachment. I don't know if you all have seen the memo or not. Has anyone? Okay. Okay. So I'll just read it. It's relatively brief. So this line item covers shift differential, which is currently $1 an hour when an employee works a minimum of 6 consecutive hours between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. So if they work a minimum of 6 hours between 6P and 6A in the overnight hours. By increasing it, I'm asking to increase that to a $3 an hour shift differential for a person doing those same hours. This increase to $3 an hour would allow us to stay ahead of our competitors in both the public and in the private sector. The shift differential of $1 an hour has been in place for several years, and it has never increased since it was instituted in FY 2017. Increasing this differential would help show the employees the value placed on working overnight shifts. Overnight shift work can be difficult on an employee. It can impact their sleep pattern, home life, and physical and mental health. An increase in this line item would allow us to remain competitive in what we offer to our employees and hopefully be able to continue to retain or recruit quality employees who must perform overnight shift work in this profession. Recent feedback at our agency has revealed that some people are getting out of this profession due in part to the shift work, and others are choosing not to even enter the profession due in part to the shift work. And that's based on feedback we got from candidates for certain positions at the department. A larger differential would help offset some of the drawbacks of shift work. We are the only department in town that is regularly scheduled to work these overnight shifts. I had done some research online, and I found several contracts online offering shift differential for law enforcement in New Hampshire, police and corrections, and I found anywhere from 75 cents to $2 an hour. I also found a private company here in town that stocks shelves overnight. They offer a $2 an hour shift differential. And so I'm asking for the $3. It does look like a large increase, comparatively speaking, but I think that $3 an hour differential would allow us to remain very competitive with having to staff police and dispatch in the overnight hours. All told, for both the police and the dispatch, it's an addition of $34,704, which I think is all money is important. I certainly understand that, but in order to help offset some of the drawbacks of having to do shift work, I think it's a reasonable cost and something to request. So that would be the reason for the increase in shift differential. I had already included this in my budget before employees actually came to me and asked if I had thought about looking to increase the shift differential. So I was really glad to be able to say I've already put it in there. But as to what amount is approved, I couldn't say. But so they are talking about it currently.
Are you ready for questions?
Sure am.
Who's got the first one? Lou.
Mine is more of a comment. When it comes to police, fire, ambulance, EMTs, dispatch, there's human lives that are depending upon those people. And you want the best qualified, the best hardworking people, and you need to pay them accordingly. I'm in full support. Raising the differential pay for our folks that put their lives in danger is, it's well worth it. Thank you. And I say that having members of my family involved in law enforcement at all levels, local, state, and federal.
I think it's important to note that in FY17, when this was instituted, it was $1 an hour, which was probably about reasonable, and it's never increased since then. So I think we're a little bit behind the curve in that regard. So for a relatively small amount of money, this is an opportunity for us to try and get slightly ahead of that curve for shift differential.
You may have mentioned it. How many people do we normally have at night on dispatch?
One dispatcher
Just one.
and one police officer on the overnight shifts.
Okay. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. Something that sort of stood out for me in looking at the dispatch budget, and comes to mind particularly the Board of Selectmen at a recent meeting, I think, approved the algorithm for the distribution of cost allocations for what the town would be looking to bill Newbury, Sunapee,
Right.
Sutton, and Wilmot.
Correct.
So the question that comes to mind is, when I look at this, I see operating expenses as it relates to, people in the space working in the dispatch center. And what question jumped to my mind is, I presume that the chief and maybe another officer is involved in supervising and managing the effort. And I was curious about why there isn't an allocation of salaries that would pertain to the amount of time that the chief and whoever else, the lieutenant, may be involved in the effort. So shorthand, a cost allocation, so that we are seeing what those expenses are and potentially deciding that they should be shared or allocated to those towns that we are providing the service for. So I just wanted to raise that to see what that might look like. Chief, would you have a guesstimate of what percentage of your time that you spend?
No, I wouldn't, I don't have that right now, but we do have a dispatch supervisor currently, and that's included in the dispatch wages, but there are certain roles and responsibilities that I assign to folks in the department, and there is a police officer who does oversee the dispatch operations before it even gets to me, but we don't break that out in terms of that.
Because, that to me would be something that we would want to consider, because certainly, even though you may have delegated that responsibility, ultimately, it's still your responsibility, and the officer's time, who has more of the direct supervision, as well if they're on the police force and they're not necessarily a full-time part of the dispatch team, but they do have supervisory, that there'd be some allocation of those management expenses just to fully reflect the cost. Now, if we make the decision, it doesn't make sense to for whatever reason, include that in the allocation. I just think it's a way of really understanding what the total cost of that operation is. So I would like to bring that to the committee for discussion, if that's something that may be worthwhile.
Well, I don't know if we have any say-so over the algorithm and what we bill the other towns from a budget committee perspective in the line items, right? So you're saying, based on chief's time and any other New London employee, that we should be figuring out how much time they spend to the larger line item and then billing the other towns accordingly.
And I'm not suggesting that it would require the billing. I see that as a separate decision, because there's, I'm sure, a lot that plays into that. But in terms of understanding what the associated costs are of that function, it would seem to me to be a reasonable thing that the people who, let me hear the chief discussing, the deliberations you make with regard to shift differential, the hiring, the monitoring, the reviewing. I would presume there's a lot that goes into, from a management perspective, organizing and running the dispatch center. And I would think it would be very helpful to see that time or the dollars associated with that in front of us in some way. And like I say, I'm not saying it necessarily leads to the algorithm, but it just may, we would be more informed of the all-in cost. Does anyone have any comments?
No, I guess I understand you want like some visibility to
Right.
where they're
way
allocating
to
time.
put it.
I guess as far as the budget goes, how would that affect the budget for the line item for dispatch?
Well, I think for all the funds that we are charged with having a role in appropriating, that we want to have as clear a view on that as possible. And so I see that as a real transparency question. And that's the, if someone else has another comment that doesn't think it's something worthwhile, but from my perspective, I feel like this does not reflect the full investment in manpower that the town has committed to this function. And I would like to see more transparency on that.
And I'm only asking to clarify, to
Yeah.
understand your point more.
Yeah.
So which line item would this affect in the operating budget for dispatch? Is it a salary? Is it like wages or overtime? Or is it a question around shift differential? Are you asking how much time are they
I would
spending?
add, I understand what Karen's saying to be that there is some percentage of Chief Cobb's time that goes to dispatch. How to calculate that would be up to the chief to make a determination. And there may be other personnel that are not directly paid as dispatch or communication specialists. To be able to have a view of the total cost of dispatch, because presently, 100% of the chief's time is in the police budget. So it's a matter of how the budget is presented and looks, not necessarily that it's going to mean a change in the algorithm, but I don't know enough about the algorithm calculation to be informed, but the London bears a significant cost, and if there is more cost that actually does exist for dispatch, Bill, would it affect how we look at the algorithm in terms of what we charge other towns? And I know it's not that simple because we want to retain the towns that are our customers. So I think that is what you're trying to get at. If I'm misrepresenting it, let me know. But
No, can I?
sure, yeah.
Thank you, Charlie. You said that very succinctly. I'll just, for the latest algorithm, in the 2025 budget, we had 623,083, and that's per the algorithm report. The actual budget was $2,500 higher, so I don't know, there may just be some small item that doesn't get passed on. And we're billing out as a fee $224,299. So that means the New London taxpayer is bearing a cost of $398,784, according to this. And I think it would be really important for us to know more, the fully loaded, more or less, to use another term, but Charlie said it very succinctly, and I thank him for doing that.
Yes, but I look at call volume too. New London is far and away the highest user of the dispatch function. So the call volume is important, I think, to consider in that as well.
Oh, of course, absolutely. I'm not critiquing, I'm not saying this algorithm needs to be changed. That's not my question. Because that's a decision for the Board of Selectmen, to my understanding. What I'm suggesting is, when we look at this appropriation on the budget, that we're missing that aspect of it that relates to the chief's time and whoever else, what other officer may be involved in the managing, in the running of that function.
So, tell me if I'm wrong. So you're looking to potentially add or break out chief's salary and an officer's salary between dispatch and police budget?
That could be an approach. I'm not suggesting I'm not saying that's the right, that could be an approach. I think we should be open to discussing what is the best way to have transparency on the cost of that function.
Kim, it looks like you have something. Or I'm just,
I have nothing to say about it.
okay,
I'm
great.
willing to chime in, but I think that
I don't know sure, we can talk about the breaking out of salaries between two line items. I'm not sure it would change chief's salary unless that would add additional. It's not as if you're going to do less. If anything, it would add more to her salary. But I think that the salaries are coming from multiple different data points, right? Based on what we pay chief of police, right? So can we, maybe this is something we can take offline as far as what exactly you might be looking for, to see if that's something we can bring next time we have a conversation about it.
Question, differential. The $3 rate gets us above everybody else. Why go to 3 and not go to 2 or 2.50?
I think the $3 for the overall cost that it would cost the town, the benefit that the employees will see, and ultimately that the town will see, is going to be that much greater. It might help retain some of those people that we need to be working the overnight, midnight shift, because another competitor that we have is departments in the state that don't even have a midnight shift, perhaps. So they might be able to go somewhere else and not even have to work a midnight shift. So the $3 to go from 1 to 3, again, I think we were behind the curve, having not increased it in 8 years. And so we probably should have already been at $2 an hour shift differential, but that's why I'm asking to increase it to 3. I know on paper it does look like a 200% increase, but overall the amount of money for that amount of money, I think the benefit on the other end will be pretty great.
Okay. Naive question. Is it feasible to outsource our evening overnight dispatch to another dispatch center?
I think that's a question for the Board of Selectmen, if we were
So where I'm going with that is,
to be doing
I'm
that.
just going to say, you've got X associated in total dollars that are for that evening shift in personnel, and it's very difficult to staff it. There are other dispatch centers in the state. Would we ever think about going to another dispatch center and saying, at 7 o'clock at night, or whatever the cutoff is, we reroute all our dispatch to your center, we end up paying that?
The
center?
cost to operate the dispatch center, I think, will remain the same, and then you'll have that additional cost above and beyond, whatever
Well,
that may be.
The dispatch, no, you would not have the labor expense.
Charlie, I think for years and years and years, it's been understood that we retain a 24/7 physical presence. So if somebody wants to walk into the police station, there'll be a human being there.
Yeah.
If there's a prisoner there, there's somebody there. So you'd be replacing the dispatch person with a different person who would still be there drawing wages. There may be a wage difference, but there's not a 0 to
I
whatever.
thought that there's a people
Because
presence difference.
We are
You're
committed to
saying
being a
there isn't.
24/7 coverage town.
Okay, fine, thanks. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, go ahead.
And another question with regarding to this dispatch as it relates to the dispatch agreement. And Bill brings up a point, so I just wanted to kind of pick up on that. Even outside of dispatch, we, our communications, we offer services to the other towns for booking and processing of arrests and some other things. So I was curious if indeed we are holding an arrestee for another town, do we charge for that, or?
We don't hold arrestees for other towns. Other towns might use our booking facilities. State Police would be an example. If they arrest someone on Interstate 89, instead of transporting that person all the way down to Concord or elsewhere, they might use our facility because we're a lot closer, and it's a safe place for them to come and process their arrest.
So they do the booking, the fingerprinting?
Oh, yes, it's their arrest. They simply are using our facility, but that's part and parcel of the partnership that we have with New Hampshire State Police. They use our facility, they back us up on calls, we back them up on calls if need be. So that's just kind of the cooperation that New Hampshire law enforcement sees.
And we do the monitoring of the person that is held?
We will be watching
CCTV?
the person who's down and booking with the trooper or whoever the person is, whoever the officer is, yes, to make sure that they're safe.
So while the person is there the whole time, though, it's our person in the dispatch center that is watching them via the CCTV?
But they're never alone. The arrestee is not left in the processing area for hours at a time or anything. The police officer or trooper that brings them in, they don't leave them there. We're not holding them for any length of time.
So they.
Dispatch is aware that, oh, a trooper has somebody under arrest right now. I'm going to make sure that I have that screen up so that I can watch them and make sure they're okay.
So the trooper stays with them?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we don't hold people in the facility for any length of time if we can help it.
So I'm just trying to picture this. So the person is in the cell, and the trooper is staying in the
If they
space with
even,
them?
if they even get to the cell for any length of time. So if a state trooper comes in tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning, they arrested somebody for DWI on Interstate 89. They'll bring them to New London PD, they'll put them in the temporary holding cell, they'll do all of their booking and processing, and then they will stay with that arrestee until they are released.
Okay.
But we don't hold them, we don't charge by the hour for the cell or anything. It's,
No, I was just trying to understand the scope of
Sure.
services in terms of the
yep,
algorithm that we have. So, thank you.
that isn't any part of the algorithm at all.
No, but it's part of the dispatch service scope of work, and it's included in the agreement, and as I saw it,
Okay.
I was just trying to reconcile the agreement to the algorithm, and from what I can
Okay.
see, the algorithm is,
That's not, yeah.
pertains to the service calls, unrelated to.
We don't have an
the-
agreement with state police, though.
That's why I mentioned in my question the other towns, Newbury, Sutton, Sunapee, and
Okay.
Wilmot. So you brought up the state police
Oh,
as an
like for
example.
instance, the dispatch center can monitor Sunapee. They have a processing area. They can dial into those cameras and watch Sunapee as they're processing their arrest. That might be what you're also referring to or
I'd
seeing
like
there.
to follow up with a number of these offline. I think would be really helpful if that would be possible.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other dispatch questions? Joe? Sure, yeah. Green light.
Joe Cardillo. Just a general question, sort of along the lines of what Charlie was going down. It's been a while since I've done this. When I first started, I think we had 10 towns that were involved, including us, in dispatch. We're down to half that. There's 4 other towns. Also knowing that changes keep getting thrown at municipalities, all kinds of towns. We see our insurance rates going up for liability issues. Are we anticipating for our dispatch where we're going to get to a point for liability issues where we will actually have to staff this differently than we're doing now? We have one person on dispatch 24/7 at least. We have an overnight shift that's one person on. What happens in the event? Will there be some mandate that comes down that says you need 2 people down in the event, 2 people on in the event that one of those people has a medical event and isn't able to answer a call? Do we anticipate any changes like that coming down the pike? Along with that, on the other side is we've seen some attrition in participation. Do we anticipate any further attrition for any specific reasons where both those things combined may at some point us in a direction where we get to not just an overnight outsourcing of dispatch, but really considering the possibility that we participate in some other dispatching services and outsource everything. I know that would it would put 3 other or 4 other towns in a position where they would have to go somewhere else also. Can you speak to that at all?
I
What
think-
we see coming down the pike?
I'll try to
Liability and where we might see some attrition.
liability, in terms of mandating staffing, if the state of New Hampshire were to mandate staffing, they would have to, unless it's going to be an unfunded mandate, which certainly the state has been known to do, but I don't see any mandated staffing levels. That's nothing that I've heard in all of my conversations in terms of a dispatch center. And in terms of attrition or other towns leaving, I have no indication that any of the towns we dispatch for right now are leaving.
And I guess just the final follow-up to that is, the bigger question is, have we considered or explored in recent years a full-blown transfer to outsourcing dispatch completely?
That is not something that the Board of Selectmen has discussed.
So that would be
with
a
me.
Board of Selectmen conversation.
I don't think it's a budget committee issue.
Understood. I just,
Tonight.
again, all those other things play into what's coming down the pike cost-wise for the board. to
Well, the
consider.
dispatch center has been here for 50 years, and, you know, it's a service that the town of New London, certainly, and I'll just speak to our town, that people like to have here in town, and I think that is a very valuable resource here in town. The other towns being a part of it and leaving over the years, I think they all must have had their reasons. We don't need to get into those here tonight, because I don't know all of them. A lot of them happened before I was in this position. So I guess I don't have any indication, like I said, that anyone's looking to leave that we currently dispatch for.
Good. Thanks. All right, why don't we get you off the hook and move to Chief Lyon to cover fire, if that's okay with everybody? All right. Thanks, Chief Cobb. So fire begins on page 10, halfway through, and ends on 11.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So like Chief Cobb, we've got our operating budget and wages. I'm not sure which one you'd like me to tackle first, if there's a preference.
I think it's your preference.
Well, why don't we go with the operating budget, since that's probably the easiest from a change perspective. The operating budget, one of the more significant increases was for our personal protective equipment. We were fortunate that the select board allocated funding last year. Was it last year? Maybe the year before. Some gopher funds for PPE, which we replaced a bunch of our protective equipment. For better or for worse, just jacket and pants, and my apologies for not bringing my whole board like I did for the select board, showing the cost increases as well as the total cost to outfit a firefighter now. Just one set for jacket and pants is now $4,200. That doesn't include the $639 for boots or $100 for gloves, and you certainly get the point as far as it's a significant increase. We, based upon the NFPA, National Fire Protective Association, we replace our gear every 10 years. There's some firefighters that are interior firefighters that are more aggressive and therefore greater wear and tear, whether it be through trainings or whatever the case may be. And so they may get gear replaced every 5 years based upon the condition of their PPE. What we're finding is in many communities, they're buying 2 sets of gear for firefighters. And the issue is with the toxins that we're exposed to at various fires or incidents, those have to be laundered, and also it assists as far as the wear and tear. There's currently concerns with PFAS, and obviously that it's almost in everything we have. If you're wearing a ski jacket for Lou and it's water resistant or waterproof, that also has contaminants in it. So we understand that there's an effort by the fire service in order to go to personal protective equipment that doesn't expose us to carcinogens. We're going to calls that expose us to carcinogens. We don't necessarily need to do it day in and day out. So that was the reason for the more significant increase for, I believe it was 681. Any other questions as far as, or anything you would like me to highlight? I know that Charlie had a question on fuel. Basically from the telephone line item, 341, down to 695. So when it comes to fuel, again, would love to know where costs are going up or down. Our fuel line item is for diesel as well as gasoline. Diesel's a bid price through our DPW department, so we fuel our 4 main pieces of apparatus, the 2 engines, the ladder, and the tanker down at the DPW. Our 3 support vehicles, car 1 and 2, are fueled through the state program as well as our utility. So, you know, the guess is, could we save some on fuel? We probably could.
So mine was a math exercise, Jim.
Yeah.
It was the ask of 27,200. The 3-year average costs have been 13,583. If I inflate it by 3%, I get to 14,000 annual, and I come up with a delta of 13,200. So that's what I was trying to reconcile.
Sure.
And to me,
And I think
there might be
there's-
some room there.
Yep, sure.
Any other questions on equipment, et cetera? First, Jay's going to cover salaries, wages, et cetera, but any questions on those items from any member? Okay.
So this is, in order to sort of explain this, I'm just going to go over the past history. For better or for worse, the fire service is looking at a demographic cliff, and certainly the issues with recruitment and retention have always been there for call and volunteer departments. Now we're finding even in career departments, individuals that jump from department to department, a loss of institutional knowledge. And so for the New London Fire Department, we had some issues because the number of general alarms that we were going to in the mid-90s. Many of the smaller communities that are contiguous to New London are facing these same issues today, and it should be interesting to see how they deal with things, not only from an operational standpoint, but also from a societal standpoint. Things have changed, especially in the last 30 years. So in the late 90s, I was hired as the fire prevention and training captain. We focus on 3 main things: preparedness, training, and code compliance. The preparedness aspect, that's the truck checks, that's the running of the apparatus, engaging the pumps, all the minutia that takes place during the daytime hours in order for when a call comes in, for all intents, and yes, they're part-time employees, but for all intents and purposes, they're volunteers. They come and go when they want. And so for us, it's important to maintain a high level of training and obviously roster. The issue that we're faced with today, and certainly when you look at our roster of 43 current members, you think, well, there's not an issue. Well, out of those 43 members, there's really a handful of us that are covering 700 calls plus annually. The remainder go to general alarms, and those general alarms are when we need a greater number of individuals, and that's typically 110 to 150 calls on an annual basis. Already this year, I think we're 860 calls so far, and 134 of those are general alarms, meaning the entire department goes to. So what has changed in New London? Certainly when you look at 1987, and I apologize if you already watched this online, and I'm reiterating the same information that I gave before. In 1987, we had 34 members of the New London Fire Department. Those 34 members all lived in the town of New London. 30 of those individuals worked in the town of New London. What's changed? We currently have 43 members. Out of those 43 members, 18 people live in town. 11 work in town. Out of those 11, it's our fire prevention captain, one of our lieutenants, a per diem member, and myself. So now we're down to 7. We have 2 police officers, fortunately. Those 2 police officers are available, contingent upon their shifts, and then some retirees and other people that own their own businesses. So the concern not only is from the response time, but also taking care of the individuals that have been taking care of the general membership for years. And so that has been the catalyst for a change. And certainly when we look at, obviously, my compensation, that's based upon the STEP process. Grateful to have worked for the fire department for 33 years and I don't know, coming up 17 or so as chief. And then you look at full-time wages, that's for our fire prevention captain and our full-time lieutenant. Our part-time wages include currently the per diem person's wages as well as our call pay. So this year we're actually modifying the call pay to slightly be increased, but what we're finding is less and less participation from the general membership. So there's not a significant increase in that line item. However, we do have some funds available to implement additional per diem people based upon a vacancy right now or leave of absence. So when we look at the increase, it's slightly up to 122,000. By all means, stop me if you have any questions as I proceed along. Our call pay, this is a pretty significant increase, up to $43,200. In the past, we paid $50 for 12-hour shifts. So Monday through Friday, when those people are working outside of town, we have our core group of individuals that are working Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After 7 p.m., what we've done is we've had a very successful business model that's worked well for 25 years, and we've had our officers take shifts in a 12-hour shift being on call. And they're compensated at $50 an hour. What we're finding is the shifts at night, and especially on the weekends, are getting more and more difficult to fill. If anyone's available, they can cover. I think it's the 19th and 20th, and then the next weekend we have some Christmas vacancies if anyone's interested. And so what happens is if our membership doesn't take it, typically I sign up for those vacancies. So what the proposal is instead of $50, it's the state minimum wage of $7.25, $90 for that 12-hour shift, $180 for the weekend 24-hour shifts, in an effort to incentivize individuals, but also compensate them at a rate that hopefully will make a difference. But looking at where people are currently living and the participation levels, I think we would have been in this predicament probably 5, 6, 7 years ago if it wasn't for a group of really dedicated employees. We're grateful to have a well-trained department It's a double-edged sword, especially when our well-trained department, when we assist with young individuals' passions and they become full-time firefighters, which is a wonderful thing. But last year, we had an individual that participated at a ton, and due to the work schedule and shifts down south, he's no longer able to participate like he once did. So that's the rationale for that pretty significant increase. The other increase that was originally $34,800, we reduced to $20,800, and this is for the weekend. So in the past, it was always an on-call person. You may have seen the New London utility truck around town, maybe at Hannaford's or Rockies, whatever the case may be, and that would be an on-call person. So when a call comes in, that person then responds in the town utility truck. It's set up with a gas meter, the various tools and equipment that we need to mitigate less hazardous incidents. However, again, this is more and more difficult to get people to sign up because of their busy work schedules, and so, or family life obligations. And so what we're proposing is to, instead of cover, I believe it was, initially it was going to be 16 shifts, is to reduce that to 104 and to go from a 12-hour shift down to an 8-hour shift, reducing the amount of requests. And so that is a new line item that our finance director established for us. Thank you again. And then that brings us to overtime wages. When we look historically at overtime wages, the overtime wages were either not fully used or slightly used. We again are grateful to have dedicated, in this particular case, a dedicated individual that when a call comes in, he responds back to most of the general alarms. In fact, I think he's 3 above my current response rate, which he's taking quite delight in. However, that overtime amount reflects the hours and number of calls after hours that we cover. Most employees cover 2,080 hours. The fire department and our police chief is correct. There's not a scheduled 24-hour shift, but we don't dictate when calls come in or what the situation is. In fact, we've done a recent analysis on our calls, when they come in, after hours, and it's really interesting statistically. Some of the busiest days are actually Sundays. So for instance, our deputy chief, the last 2 Sundays that the deputy chief has covered, one day was 9 calls, starting at 3 o'clock in the morning. Another day was 6 calls. So if someone's on call, available, they don't mind coming in, leaving their families or whatever the case is, maybe once or twice, hopefully none. No calls, but that's not what the statistics have. And certainly what drives our calls, inclement weather like this evening, and certainly individuals. When people are awake, that's when we generate more calls. So certainly 6 in the morning until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night seem to be busier times, and also times of year. When the summer residents come, there used to be a drop statistically from May into June, and then when the summer residents arrived, it would increase. And now it's pretty consistent throughout the year as far as our responses. I think I covered everything, but I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Absolutely. What questions for Chief Lyon? Karen?
Chief, I have a question with regard to the $14,000 cut you took in, I believe, the per diem.
Yes.
How do you see that impacting your effort to incentivize people for taking on those assignments? I know when, by attending the Firewards meetings, you all had really thoughtfully laid that out in terms of trying to to develop incentives and, move things up to get a better response. So just wanted to circle back and ask what that kind of change do you anticipate to the plan?
So this was really a stopgap or a Band-Aid fix initially because of the issues that the fire department has. And certainly, I think it's a little bit premature. Our chief fire ward and I are at some point going to be meeting with the select board to look at sort of the intricacies of the New London Fire Department and where we go from here, because there is no silver bullet in the fire service, and certainly I think the police department's done a really good job in being proactive when it comes to the bonuses that they give their members. So for a full-time firefighter, we actually receive trained individuals in order for them to be in the retirement system, where a police officer doesn't necessarily have to. But what we've done a poor job doing is showing the deficiencies what we have, and I think that this per diem level, although there was a cut, I think that from the select board's perspective, it wasn't detrimental. And so originally there was a recommendation to cut even more money, a $20,000 reduction. And what we did was we looked at how can we take those funds and modify it. So by having a shorter coverage area, and we're hoping to have the same coverage from a consistency standpoint, once again, from a dispatch perspective, if you have a variety of different things happening at different times, it can lead to some complexities. So certainly the 7 in the morning till 7 at night, we staff that level based upon the times of the greatest number of calls statistically. So what that does is by reducing it, there are going to be times that there's delayed response, because then we'd cover those shifts either with on-call or having to request a general alarm. So is it a huge impact? No, I think that the select board was very thoughtful when they looked at it, and it certainly made us look at things and evaluate how can we do things slightly differently while still trying to take care of the on-call officer system, knowing that, again, this is a Band-Aid fix, and the beneficial thing right now, we're saddened to have an individual on leave, but what it's giving us is the ability to not wait until July 1st to start per diem coverage on the weekends. We're able to almost cover weekends immediately by reallocating some funds and seeing if we even have participants. We're fortunate to have 8 full-time people that are also affiliated, not with the New London Fire Department, affiliated in other departments, Hanover, Leb, Hartford, Derry, Concord. And so hopefully we'll be able to use some of their expertise and backfill some vacancies that we have.
So you see this adjusted amount, and I guess cut probably isn't the right word. It would be cut from your original request, so it's obviously an increase from the prior budget year.
Yes.
So you see this revised number as being in the right place for you right now?
Yeah, I do. I think that, so although I don't think we're going to be able to fill every Saturday and Sunday. I just realistically, when you look at the numbers of people that we have in the department and the importance now, there's certainly a trend to focus on self-care and family more than any time ever that we've seen. And so the difficult thing is when their families are off on the weekends, it's going to be more difficult to staff those days than it would be midweek shifts.
Thank you.
Lou?
Yes, Chief, when do you see the necessity to increase the number of permanent full-time employees in the fire department? It's coming.
It's coming. It's here now, but I think that in an effort to be fiscally responsible, that we as department heads need to look at all aspects and to see if we can, whether it be per diem shifts, various grants, and so at some point we'll need 3 additional people that will cover 24 hours a day. We've looked into staffing levels. We've looked into response to calls. Do we not respond to various incidents, and how do we modify that to better serve the community? And again, it's not. It would be easier if there were departments out there or a local company that would provide immediate assistance if your house is flooding and the water's coming up to the electrical panel or your furnace, that they would go and pump out your basement. We've got pumps that we loan out. It would be easy if there was a local locksmith that would take care of individuals, so when Mrs. Smith is outside her house with groceries trying to get into the house from Hannaford's, there was a company that would take care of them. And in the fire department, the short and long of it is we're no longer just the fire department. It's like an all hazards mitigation team that is multifaceted, from hazardous materials to EMS to high angle, whatever the case may be. And so the town of New London has been responding to a number of calls that other departments have already gone to full-time levels. Meredith just put on 6 full-time people, and they're in the vicinity of 550 calls annually. And so for us, again, our business model, the way we've been running things and mitigating the let's say, quote unquote, non-emergency calls, the minor motor vehicle accidents that's only leaking fluids, where a fire officer can go throw down some speedy dry, the carbon monoxide detector activations with no symptoms. We've done a really, really good job delaying the inevitable, and here we are.
Thanks. We're over 2 hours. I know we have Firewards and emergency management. Hopefully we can get those in. Those aren't huge line items. But any additional questions for Chief?
We're not purchasing a new command vehicle this year. So, yeah.
Okay. It seems like no additional questions. Thank you, Chief Lyon.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Firewards.
Should I just
I think we
sit
can
here,
fit that
Steve?
in pretty quickly, hopefully. Is there any questions for Firewards from the Budget Committee?
The only thing I would add is our prior clerk left the department. This line item's probably on me for not allocating resources, so you'll see that some of the funds were not spent, and part of that reason was we have our firefighter Jenna Edmonds that also assists with the clerk duties, and in the course of her duties and responsibilities, day in and day out, she contributes, and hence the reason why it hasn't been spent. But I probably should break that out instead of our operating budget for the fire department, because it's the same time frame. We should probably reallocate those funds and make sure it's properly withdrawn from that account.
Okay. All right. Hearing no questions, emergency management.
Okay,
Do you want to come up to the podium to speak?
I can do it here. or
You want to
can-
do it here? That's fine. Okay.
Let's see, you will see most of these.
Need your mic on.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. The changes are, first of all, probably for the first time in recent recorded history, we have received, instead of an unfunded mandate, but a state has decided, the state has decided to fund something which is uniquely to municipalities, which is the Code Red. We did away with Code Red. And if you tune into the latest Citizen, Municipal Matters, you will see an article in it. I'm going to follow that up with articles on the Intertown and the Beacon. And it's basically the state now has a program that is statewide, and that obviates, makes it the $9,400 needless. Equipment repair and maintenance, that's basically generator maintenance. We will be doing that sometime in spring. And what I understand is, again, it is done by the Highway Department, but it's under emergency management budget. It's the new figure is $6,900, and so I put $7,000. Then the other ones are just, travel and meals, conferences and training once in a while. The MREs we just received them. We should be getting an invoice soon, $1,700. The hazmat team fee was just recently paid. It hasn't been reflected in. That's $2,000. And I'm asking for a little bit of money for public awareness on behalf of both the new Ready NH and emergency management matters for the public. And that's pretty much it. It's gone down 38%.
Questions for Lou?
One. Accreditation is annual and is a requirement,
Not for emergency management.
okay? But we do it every year.
Yes, we do it every year.
Why?
It's a state requirement, I think.
Okay, well, if it's
Yeah,
a state requirement, then I
it-
get it, but
we-
it's a good housekeeping seal of.
Yeah, you're talking the.
2,000.
I'm sorry?
Isn't it, it's a 2,000 line item?
The
$2,000.
Oh, that's a hazmat fee.
Oh, that's a hazmat fee.
Yeah.
Excuse me, mixed it up, sorry.
That's,
You're looking at the $100 cert team? Is that what you're?
No,
The certification?
I was looking at the notation requirement.
Oh, it's in the- sorry.
Maintain accreditation.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We have to have the hazmat.
Team.
it's a fee that is paid, actually, it's paid through the fire department.
Yeah, this is funds for the Midwestern Regional Hazmat Team, and this covers from basically Sutton up to Lyme, New Hampshire. And each community pays a fee in order to gear up and staff the regional hazmat team. So if we have a motor vehicle crash on 89, rollover, they'll show up with booms and pads. If we weren't affiliated, then the town would be on the hook for the hazmat team coming in and all the respective, now, and certainly we could go after the insurers but yes.
All right. All right. I dare not ask. Other business. Any additional business? Karen?
Just a question. Is there a way we can have a window into these revolving funds in terms of what is sitting there in balances? Like the chief brought up the detail fund, just as an example. And there may be,
Yeah,
there may be a window already, I'm just not aware of it. Thank you.
Do you want to answer that, Kim?
No, it's public information, anybody can have it.
Yeah.
It's not part of the budget, obviously, but it's in public information that anybody could have.
No, I get that, and the reason I ask is trying to, understanding that balances can be pulled from there to offset requests in the budget. I think it could be helpful to see what is in fact sitting, what is in fact in those accounts. And where would one see it? Is it in the town report, or is it in Questica now? And
It changes like
Right,
constantly
right.
as, like with rec revolving or police details, it's as events happen or as
Sure. So
details.
when's
So it
the best
changes
place
all
to
the
see it?
time.
She's asking where the best place
place
is
to see
find
it is.
What's that?
You can see the year-end numbers in the town report.
Yeah.
But you'd have to ask me anytime you want to know an updated number.
Okay,
We don't
get
publish
it.
it anywhere.
All right, thank you very much.
Lou?
Yeah, I'm sort of, one of the things that this points out when it comes to, the first responders, we as a town, we need a more empirical plan, master plan, that we can actually see long-term and see the changes that we will be budgeting on, not next year, but 5 years down the road. And I've stated this before, but I think, the Housing Commission started the ball rolling, and I think they did a great job doing the demographic future of New London. And based upon that, we're going to have a lot of new, we need to have a weight that we can ascribe, that we will influence the budget when New London grows and expands, and the services have to expand. I'm in a soapbox, but I do believe that we need to do that, and that's not the purview of the Budget Committee, but it's a planning issue, and we need to do better as a town.
Thank you. All right. Any motions to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Any seconds? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody.